Team 1. Breach, breach, breach.
You're listening to Breach Your Mind. Hey guys, welcome back to Breach Your Mind. Hope everything's going well with you today. As always, we've got Chris here with us, and we're going to talk about something that is a listener requested topic. Don't know the backstory on why this individual's requested this, and it originally started out that they wanted the topic to be on living with a family member that has an addiction, and that was simple enough to do. I've got people in my life that have addictions and things like that, so that was an easy enough topic to discuss. But then I got to thinking about it more, and what became more logical to me is, if we're going to talk about living with families with addictions, we need to simply talk about addictions itself, what an addiction is, and kind of go along with that, because it's not fair enough just to stick with just the family members that are living with addictions, because people fight addictions all the time. So if we can try to help out those that are dealing with their own addictions and things like that, then figure, why not? What's it going to hurt? Why not give it a shot? So Chris, that's what we're going to start off with. That's where we're going with this one today, is talking about addictions, whether it's a personal addiction or whether it is living with a family member with an addiction. So just to kind of give everybody a basis on where I'm coming from, and Chris may have a different standpoint on where he comes from with it. But I want to give a definition of addiction as defined by the American Psychological Association, which is, when I was going through my studies for my psychological degree, that's where I got a lot of the information that I have. The rest of it is just life experience. So according to the American Psychological Association, an addiction is a chronic disorder with biological, psychological, social, and environmental factors influencing its development and maintenance. Now, that's a whole lot just to basically say something as simple as an addiction is something that you do or ingest that develops a habit. Chris and I were talking offline before all this, and I kind of found some stuff, and we're going to get into it later, that correlates more with what my general philosophy was, despite everything I'd always been told. But all an addiction is something you do, or an action, or a substance that's ingested that creates a behavior, and that behavior becomes basically part of life. It's just like any other habit, something that can be hard to get away from. It can have negative effects on your life. But on the reverse side of it, there are positive addictions as well, as long as you keep them, within scope. So you got any different definition of, or how you would explain what an addiction is?
I mean, you just gave a professional definition of the word addiction and what an addiction is. I don't think I could word it any better.
It's a scholarly way of putting it.
It's very scholarly coming from you. It suits. Coming from you, it just sounded great, honestly. I couldn't have read that definition any better.
You're probably a better reader.
No. No. Really and truly, the only, obviously in our line of work, we deal with and see people that are struggling with all different kinds of addictions. Particularly, drug addictions. That's what people they first think about. You don't think about, or substance, whatever you want to say, alcohol, drugs, those sort of things. That's what you think of when you think about an addiction. But it could be anything.
Yeah.
It really could be. It could be anything.
Yeah. I think substance, as far as like, if you're wanting to talk about ingesting things, I think substance is the best term to use, because a lot of people don't consider a lot of things that they consume on a regular basis as an addiction. It gets real easy for people to forget that something as simple as caffeine is a drug, and I haven't looked this up, and I'm not going to do it right this second. but a drug is anything introduced into the body that alters the chemistry of your blood or in your brain. So when you introduce caffeine, you wake up groggy, you want that cup of joe to kind of get you going in the mornings. You're introducing that caffeine, and the purpose of it is for that caffeine to kind of give you some energy, boost you, and things like that. So if you're somebody that drinks coffee and doesn't rely on it, then it's not really an addiction. But if you're one of those individuals that wakes up and you literally can't get your day going, if you don't get your cup of coffee, things are just going to go south. It's just going to be a bad day. You see the coffee cups all the time that say, if I haven't had my first cup of coffee, go away, or something along those lines. The caffeine is addiction. The coffee is an addiction. The same with energy drinks. Those people that are consuming all of these energy drinks. I used to be, we're notorious for it. I used to be really bad. One of my favorites was the Red Line Extremes. It's got the little line on the bottle that says only drink half for one serving. And I was like,
you don't drink those anymore?
No, I got away from them. I got concerned about my intestinal issues that could happen from all the energy drinks.
I probably drink that's probably that nicotine. I've had that caffeine addiction, but it's mostly the energy drink addiction. I would say, honestly, it's dependence.
What nicotine?
What do you mean?
That's what nicotine, as I hit my vape.
Yeah. No, I'll drink 2 Red Bulls a day. I
remember you had me get you a Red Bull that one time, and it was like, just the light blue can, and I wound up bringing you like that monster freaking huge can, and you're like, it's not the one I normally get, but I'm like,
Well, I try not to go above the 12-ounce ones, because there was a period of time when I was in the military that I was drinking 3 16-ounce Red Bulls a day.
What is that in correlation to Rippets?
Oh, Rippets are different. Everybody says that. So in the military, you used to have like the little ones, but those you could only find them when you're on deployment. And apparently there was like some astronomical amount of caffeine. I'm probably wrong on that now, but that's what the myth was. Like these little itty bitty cans of Rippets that we basically lived off of. They were supposed to have some, they weren't allowed to sell it in the United States amount of caffeine.
God.
So, but none of us, I don't think any of us actually looked on it. There may have been some of us that did, but we just, pounded them back. Whatever.
So it's Rippets in Copenhagen?
Yeah, Rippets in Copenhagen. That's how you survived a deployment for real.
Yeah. But so any substance can be that way. The caffeine, the nicotine doesn't have to be marijuana, cocaine. It doesn't have to be some kind of illicit drug. It can literally be something that you get over the counter, and it becomes something that's a part of your life that you can't do without. Then if you move away from stuff that you ingest, if you move away from a substance such as, caffeine, nicotine, marijuana, illicit drugs, if you move away from that, there's things that are simple actions. Gambling can be an addiction. It's not something you take, but you become addicted to it. You have to do it. You're constantly looking for that next.
It's actually a huge problem in the United States too.
Yeah, a really huge one. Even something as natural as sex can become an addiction. And that's something that a lot of people battle with. It's ruined a lot of lives, ruined a lot of marriages. But it's an addiction. So when we're talking about that, we have to understand, when you're talking about addiction, you have to understand that it's not just something that they take. It's not because they drink every night. It's not because they smoke. It's not because, they like their designer drugs or whatever the case is. It can be literally any facet of a person's life that can be an addiction. Video games. I know Chris and I both enjoy video games, but video games can be an addiction. Now, if you're obviously a professional gamer and that's how you're, paying your bills, making your money, making your millions.
That's different. That's a different.
Yes. That's a profession. That's not an addiction. But what I'm getting to is, those people have a profession, but it's those individuals that their lives are consumed. You can go on YouTube, TikTok. I've seen it come across Snapchat. where the one kid, he's either grown or almost grown, and his mom and dad were frustrated with him playing games, and dad was like, I just want you to do something, quit playing the video games. And the kid lost his mind. He threw a whole temper tantrum, and dad wound up taking his video games, taking them out in the yard, throwing them in the grass, and running over them with the mower. And this kid lost his shit. I mean, completely lost his mind. That's an addiction. If you're going into a holy fit over not being able to play your video games, and you can't do anything else in your life because you have to have it, that's an addiction. And it goes with any of that. So if you are somebody that, are questioning whether or not you've got an addiction, think about how whatever it is you're questioning is affecting your life. Can you go without it? Can you put it down at any moment and walk away from it? What impact does the substance or the action have on your life? Chris and I both just talked about it, the energy drinks. I don't drink the energy drinks anymore. I say anymore, I don't drink them as often. It's maybe once a week, if that. I used to smoke heavily. I obviously vape now after I quit for a long time and fell back into the bad habit. Chris dips. So we all have them, and it's not something to be embarrassed about or ashamed of. They happen. And sometimes they can happen without you even consciously thinking about it. It's just part of a routine, and you fall into a routine. And like me, I'm a person that I like patterns. If my pattern gets thrown off, then it throws my whole day off. So until I find something to replace something else, I can't change my pattern, or change my routine. So like now, just like for the last several years, coffee has been a part of it. I was never a huge coffee drinker. Thank you to my career, I've become someone that, will drink more coffee, or drink coffee, and I'll have to have coffee every morning. I don't have to have it, but I drink coffee every morning. So I think it's fair to say that could be an addiction for me. My vaping is an addiction, because I enjoy the little nicotine that I get out of it. I enjoy the flavor of it. So that's an addiction, but it's how you let it control your life. So me drinking coffee, I might be a little slow getting going in the morning, but it doesn't control my life. I can
You're a little
get
grouchy
going.
too.
Do
You're
I?
a little grouchy too. You're kind of grouchy.
It might just be in general life. I'm getting up in age,
No,
and
no, it's once you get that, once you drink that first cup, when we used to go to that breakfast restaurant we used to go to.
Yeah, but I was drinking 12 ounces of coffee before we even got there.
You were still grouchy. You don't have to admit it. It's okay.
No, I totally admit I was grouchy. I'm just saying, maybe it's the age. I don't get called grandpa for no reason.
That's true. I love that name.
Who was that come up with that? Was that Buckles? Or was that you?
No, don't give him credit. That was me.
That's why I was asking. You didn't speak up.
Yeah, no, don't give him credit.
I have got to
Take
put
my
a fan
thunder.
in this room. Yeah, so there's that. I think another addiction we could talk about, which kind of segues into something else that I wanted to get into. Well, I guess we need to stay back on the addiction portion of it. So a family member, living with a family member that has an addiction. I've got no formal training on this. I studied a little bit about it in college, but there's no formal training that I went through. Sadly, I took a different big path on psychology than the clinical. And I wasn't going back to school for that. 7 years was enough. But my experience on living with family members that have got an addiction problem, the vast majority have been alcohol. I've got at least one that was into illegal drugs. The way it was put to me was, I've taken everything that doesn't have to be injected through a needle. So Chris, you're the big drug guy out of the two of us, and knowing all that, I don't know how much that is, but I would venture to say that that's a vast amount of drugs that person has consumed.
Well, I mean, most drugs don't necessarily have to be taken by a needle. I can't actually think of one that you absolutely have to use a needle.
Right.
They can be taken in other, forms. So yeah, a lot would be a good assumption.
Yeah. I've got family members, and that one that was doing the illegal drugs as well, also was addicted to prescription medications. Man, I guess that was the segue away from the legal was into the pharmaceuticals, just because you could legally possess them. So that's where my experience derives from, is, alcohol, illegal drugs, and the pharmaceutical drugs. I will say that, by this time in my life, I am 42. So by this time in my life, and having lived with it for as long, the alcohol addiction was one that hit me early on, as far as having to deal with it from a family member. Family members very close to me had the addiction, and to the point where they couldn't go to sleep at night if they hadn't consumed alcohol. The middle of the day is pretty much when they started drinking. And at one point I, spoke up, kind of really confronted them. Probably didn't confront them the right way. It was more out of anger than anything. And that went south for me. There was some slapping involved in that one, but I think whenever it comes to having family members that have an addiction problem, the easiest thing that can be done is to, one, be there for them and try to help them. Don't enable them. If they're they got an alcohol problem, like, hey, can you stop and get me a 6-pack on the way home, or a 12-pack, or a case, or whatever they call them. No, no, I don't support this. By all means, if that's what you want to do it, but I don't support it. I'm not gonna help that with you. If it's some other substance, probably going to be a lot more careful, especially if it's an illegal substance. You're not going to want to be around that person. You're not going to be in the car with that person. It's very easily mistaken when you're in the car with someone who's under the influence or uses or possesses the illegal substances. It's very easy for you to get wrapped up in that, because all they got to say is, that's not mine. And I don't know how it is in every other state. And Chris, you can tell me if it's different where you are, but it's hand of one, hand of all. If it's nobody's, it's everybody's.
In most states, that's how it is.
Yeah.
In most states. I mean, there's Supreme Court case law on it. So, I mean, I would willing to bet that, I'm sure there's a few out there that constructive possession doesn't really necessarily, they don't really follow that law. But in most states, I can say it's probably true.
Yeah. So if you're with somebody or got a family member that does partake in illegal substances, just keep that in mind. Even if it's visiting them at home, you never know when a search warrant could be executed on their house. You never know when you're riding in a car with them, even if they're a passenger in your vehicle, when you're going to violate some, traffic violation, whether it's equipment violation, moving violation, get pulled over, and you get somebody who's adapt to doing those types of investigations, that really kind of focuses their career on that. They get up there and they start noticing these little clues that tip them off that something's going on. Next thing you know, you're getting interviewed by them, and, oh, that's not mine. I don't know where you found that. They just picked me up from my house, and blah, 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 blah. The whole time you're knowing that it's definitely theirs. It's not yours. Now, is you're getting arrested and going to jail for, meth they may have had, or cocaine, or illegal prescriptions. So that's something that, you have to watch out for. Maybe in saying all this, I'm kind of saying stuff that's really kind of duh. As I'm sitting here talking about it, it seems kind of duh to be repeating all this, because while the person that requested this particular topic didn't go into it, I kind of suspect that the reason behind it was how to deal with it and how to help them. And I really, and you tell me if you've got a different idea on it, but as far as helping someone with an addiction problem, I think the only thing that can really be said about it is there's nothing you can really do. You can try, by all means, especially if you care for them and you love them, you can definitely try to give them avenues and things to go down to get them the resources and help that they need. But ultimately, it's just about like anything else in life, especially if you're dealing with an adult. If they don't want it, there's nothing you can do. Now I've got family members that have been put into rehab centers by court order, by either the family seeking out the court order or through some legal avenue through criminal law, them having to go into it. In my profession, we've had to serve what's called 1013 orders here. They're involuntary committal orders. You file for the order, you submit your evidence to the judge on why this person needs to go to a rehabilitative center, and the judge signs off on it if there's evidence to suggest it. And these people are court ordered to go seek help through these rehabilitative centers, and ultimately it doesn't wind up sticking. And I applaud the families and things that are doing that, but if it's not the addicts, if it's not the person with the addiction's choice, if it's not their desire to get off of their addiction, you're spinning your wheels in the mud. Do you disagree with that?
No. That's the biggest issue that we run into, especially we get asked this question all the time. I mean, at least I do. I mean, I get asked it all of the time. What can I do to help my mother, my brother, my whoever it may be. And though it's kind of sad, I've almost become numb to giving the same explanation, but it's true. There's only so much you can do. If they don't want help, it's not going to stick.
Yeah.
For it to work, they have to want it. Mm-hmm. There are states like Georgia where you can go and you can go talk to a judge, and like you said, you can hey, here's the evidence, yada yada yada. I really think that will benefit from this. I've actually never had to do it, so I really don't know how the process even goes, and I've kind of forgotten how it goes. But there's some states that don't have that, to include the state that I'm in. I mean, we don't have that option.
Really?
Yeah, there is no such thing.
Huh.
It's a hard. I think it'd be, really hard. It's hard to see the families go through that, and they go through that process, and then from my experience, they go in, a 72-hour committal, and they're out the door.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's really and truthfully, I haven't seen any longer than that.
Yeah, typically.
I mean, it's 72 hours, and then if they wish to continue treatment, they can. Yeah. But it's 72 hours now.
But it's typically on an outpatient basis, and and especially with all the COVID stuff now.
Oh yeah.
It's even faster sometimes.
And that's the issue. And I may go way off topic here, and you can rein me back in, but that's kind of the biggest complaint from our aspect of going out here and dealing with the same people over and over again, and we know they have these issues. There's no help for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or that we're so far behind that there's not an adequate amount. Let's just say there is help out there.
Yeah.
But there's not an adequate amount. I mean, we are.
And what's there is overwhelmed.
Yes, we are being overrun.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about where you're at right now. I know when I was working there, we were starting to see it more and more. It is heroin overdoses, overdoses.
Mm-hmm.
And
we're actually tracking them now. We actually have a database that we have to to handle all that to help track the overdoses a little better now, as far as keeping track of, how many we're having and things like that.
I mean, dude, we might work on a really bad day. I remember one day we worked like 4 in a shift.
Yeah.
I mean, and just the other day,
12-hour period.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just the other day, I was going down the road to a totally different call, and I get flagged down by some truck driver, and he's like, "Hey, that dude's, there's something going on with him." He's pulled up in the parking lot. The guy is sitting on his, sitting on the, not on the throttle. What am I trying to say? No, not even the other one, the one that makes it go.
Clutch, gas,
gas.
Throttle would have worked. We would have got
it. Throttle would have worked. Yeah, but sitting on the gas, luckily his car's in park or neutral, but he's just, all you hear is this, this souped up car, wee, just full RPMs. Right?
He's got all the bumblebees upset.
And I don't mean to laugh about it, but it, we deal with it so much.
Yeah.
I mean, and luckily that naloxone, the Narcan has come out. But nowadays, with how powerful some of that stuff is with fentanyl inside of it,
yeah,
sometimes it takes 2 or 3 naloxone hits. Yep. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. It is crazy, and I can only speak on what I've dealt with personally. I have obviously never been in a situation where my family members, addicted to heroin and they're overdosing and things like that. I've only, dealt with those people on a professional basis. And the other day I dealt with one and he had just, the fiance told me he had just gotten out of like a detox program, somewhere up north. And he was back maybe 3 weeks and he, we had to go to the hospital, overdose. Yeah. It's not an easy thing. Addictions are by no means easy to get rid of, especially when it comes to a drug addiction. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I had a hiccup. I ate too fast. Especially those hardcore drug addictions. And when I say hardcore drugs, basically anything but marijuana. It's a process, and it takes, like we were trying to say, it takes that person saying, "Hold up, wait a second, something ain't right. Yep, I need some help." And he or she has to want to get the help. Exactly. And then guess what? You open the door for them. Exactly. You take them to their appointments. You take them to go see the doctors, if that's what you want to do.
Be that support for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's all you can do. Be supportive. Like what Brian said, don't go out and help them buy drugs. Obviously, you know what I mean. Like, if it's bad to the point, you also have to understand, like Brian said, that if they have an addiction, they may or may not have it on them. Mm-hmm. You may or may not have contact with law enforcement, and things can go south. And I agree with that. Things can go south. It's an unfortunate thing, but we get lied to every single day. Yep. We have to go on. If we have probable cause to make an arrest, and we have to go off of what the evidence is in front of us. If nobody's claiming it, well, it's somebody's that
It's like that thing. These ain't my pants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wake up randomly, put on somebody else's pants and got their meth in it.
Yeah. The meth fairy didn't just come out of nowhere and drop it in your car. It got there somehow. You have no idea how many times I've used that line, and they just look at you all dumbfounded, like, "Oh no, it got there." Well, got there somehow, you big dummy. So it's a hard road, and I do not envy anybody that has an addiction. I don't. I feel for them, because I think that's another point that we need to kind of make, is that there is a reason why that person has that addiction. There was something in their life that, and you can agree with me or disagree with me, but I truly wholeheartedly believe this. Something in their life happened that led them down that path, and it's just gone downhill since then.
I believe in that one. How many times have you and I had conversation, or you've been there with me, and a lot of things that I'm having conversations with, I wind up in conversation with them and trying to learn about them, I wind up being able to track it back to something that happened when they were younger, something when they were adapting as an adolescent coming up, or some life altering event. I mean, hell, a death in the family. If you have someone close to you die, that's a real easy one to fall into some form of an addiction, to the extent of I'll use alcohol. Alcohol is the typical one. It's because people believe it numbs the pain. Well, if I get intoxicated, whether it's through alcohol or any substance, but if I get intoxicated, it's going to numb the hurt. I'm not going to hurt anymore because I'm now intoxicated. Well, the only problem with that is when you consume that substance, when you consume alcohol, drugs, whatever, when you consume it, you basically hit the pause on your grief and pick it right back up whenever the alcohol or substance wears off. So as soon as you come back down from Mount High and you're back sober again, well, now that grief's all back there because you haven't dealt with the grief. The problem is still there. You just hit the pause button on it long enough to get high.
And nobody wakes up wanting to be a heroin junkie, though.
No,
there's always
there's
a starting point.
Yeah.
And if I could go back, I always wish this, because I don't ever want to see anybody going through that. If I could go back and say, let's go back in time real quick and let's avoid this incident that occurred in your life,
mm-hmm.
I would. If I could do that, I would, because I mean, it would save a bunch of people a bunch of heartache.
Go and slap the beer out of their hand, slap the crack pipe out of their hand, whatever. One of the things that I was going to get into here in a minute was, what if you try to do something healthy? Okay. What if you try to do something healthy? Like, say you decide, the way I get rid of stress is I run. So I'm grieving or I'm hurting or whatever the case is, and you go run. In most circumstances, or in a majority of the circumstances, that's going to be considered, a good addiction. But what happens if you don't deal with what's causing the pain or what's causing the problem, and it keeps getting worse to where now this healthy thing has become something that's unhealthy for you? Now all of a sudden you're running and you're getting healthy, but you're not taking care of other aspects. You're not eating like you're supposed to. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. Your mental health is still going downhill because you haven't dealt with things. And you've only supplemented your grief or whatever by filling it with this other thing. So when we're talking about people that started or became an addict or have an addiction because of something that happened in their life, the key thing, at least in my uneducated, untrained opinion, is you have to go back and you have to deal with whatever the root cause was. So if it was grieving over the loss of a loved one, you've still got to grieve. You all you did is walled it up. You built the block wall around it so that you don't feel it no more, and you've supplemented it with something else. You've still got to go back and do something with that grief. It doesn't mean you got to go back and cry, but you got to go back and you got to deal with it. If it's a childhood trauma, lots and lots of individuals wind up developing addictions after something like a sexual trauma, whether it's child molestation or things like that. They wind up developing an addiction to a substance, an action that winds up putting them on a dark path and sending them down a path that, if they don't go back and deal with the trauma and the pain caused to them from that particular incident, or years and series of incidents, then they're not going to get any better. They've got to deal with that initial pain. They've got to deal with that initial trauma so that their mind has a firm ground to build on. Because if you don't, you're just on that slippery slope again. Oh, well, you're right. I did have this happen. I'm just going to forget it ever happened and move on. Well, no, hold up. Let's deal with it. Let's go back. Let's talk about it. So I don't know, man. It's a hard topic to talk on just because there's so many things that can be there and there's so many things that can cause them. You think in terms of a college kid, what happens when kids go to college? A lot of times they wind up partying. That's where you wind up drinking and doing drugs and sex and parties and yada yada yada. And the mature person can pull themselves away from that just to start their professional life or adult life or what have you. But what happens to those individuals that they literally just went to have fun? They went to their first college party or frat party or sorority party, and we were just having fun. And the next thing you know, I just can't get through even better, those kids that are so die hard on getting the good grades. I want to make the dean's list. So now they're on these amphetamines so they can stay awake longer and study longer. And now they're addicted to Ritalin and
Adderall.
Advance and Adderall.
Adderall.
Yeah, they're addicted to all these amphetamines because it gives them that boost. They got more energy. They're staying up 2, 3, 4 days on end so they can study and do the best. And they wind up having this mental breakdown later on and become depressed and suicidal and yada yada.
Look what happened in the early 2000s. What happened in the early 2000s in Appalachia, in the coal mines? You don't know?
What?
Dude,
I didn't follow the coal mines.
You didn't follow the coal mines, dude?
No.
And it's a huge problem up in Appalachia, especially in the early 2000s. Hydrocodone. It was introduced,
Really?
and the coal mine states were targeted specifically. These small coal mine towns. The reps from hydrocodone would go to these small coal mining towns and talk to the doctors, and they were trying to push, because hydrocodone was supposed to be the impossible to get addicted to pain medicine. That's what
In the early 2000s, they said that?
Yes. When it was first branded, yes. It was supposed to be better than anything else. That's how it was pushed. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I saw a documentary on it. Yeah.
Oh, God.
And it was one of the worst things that ever happened.
Yeah.
They're still making payments. The lawsuits I think they just,
called the cradle of the opioid epidemic, Black Bear.
Somewhere in Appalachia. Are you looking it up?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right a second.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the early 2000s. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, it says first introduced in the late 2000s. Appalachia, the cradle of the opioid epidemic. The Appalachia. Okay, all that. Running from New England all the way down to northern Georgia, Alabama, and the Appalachian region of the United States. Treasure trove. Blah 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 blah. All right, so that's a whole lot of reading to try to do for just.
I'm telling you, I watched a documentary on it, and I don't.
Yeah, they were kind enough to put a timeline in for me, so I'm going to look at that while you talk.
Yeah, but no, it was remarkable, and that's where all those you started hearing about the Florida was riddled with the pill doctors,
right?
The one where they would
pill
just
mills.
The pill mills. Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking of. They were riddled with them, and I mean the DEA, the diversion from diversion guys from the DEA. They weren't tracking it until it was already too late. And then finally they went in there and cleaned house. But it has created not only almost a damn dependence on pain medication, but it's destroyed families. I mean, it's really sad.
Well, I mean, and it's still a huge one now. I mean, we how many times we find in cars now when we're doing things that we find, hydrocodone. It's either hydrocodone or a derivative of hydrocodone, or a drug that has hydrocodone in it. And it's got somebody else's name on the label, or it's a pill bottle that doesn't have it, or it's an Aleve bottle that it's just Aleve. Okay, that's
when I first started, almost 7 years ago now. I mean, pills weren't nearly as expensive as what they are now. That's why heroin's coming back because it's a cheaper alternative to pills.
Well, and they've gotten better at tracking it. They've gotten better at tracking the drugs now, the prescription meds.
Yeah.
I think they have a national database that if you go and, like, say if I were to go to the pharmacy here in Georgia and get a controlled substance through my pharmacy, if I were to get go to Florida and get a prescription from a doctor in Florida and then go to a Publix pharmacy to try to get it filled there, is a national registry that would automatically pop up. Oh, well, we can't fill this right now. It just shows that, 2 days ago you had this prescription filled in
Yeah.
Georgia. So that's helped out a lot as far as curbing that goes. So
Yeah.
the cost of it, as well as the regulation of it.
Yeah.
I know I've discussed it with my wife. It's been frustrating with us. Our son takes an ADHD medication, and every 3 months he has to have a med check. He has to have a med check just to see how the medication, and if that was the case, I'd be fine with it. But and I say I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it now because I know why, but it's frustrating. But it's a federally mandated thing that because it's a controlled substance, he has to see the doctor so often. He can't just have a 120 pill prescription thrown at him and have 6 months worth of medication. He can't do that. We have to go in and see the doctor ever so often to make sure things are being done like they're supposed to be done. And that's the way it is with most, if not all, of the controlled substances now. I think is you can't just go and get a 6-month supply. You have to have an individual prescription per month that you need a refill.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, in my understanding, is that's one of the reasons why, is because all the pill mills and the pill doctors were slinging that stuff out there so easily that these individuals were able to go get these things and have them in such vast quantities, either for their own consumption or for distribution, which is a huge problem of it. Because if you knew, Jim Bob down the street gets, 800 pills a month, and you just want 10 to kind of get you through the day or whatever. I don't know how many they take. But if you knew that, you're going to go give him 20, 50, $100 for, however many pills he was going to give out to you. And Jim Bob didn't care because he had 800 freaking pills and he didn't even really need them. He faked a back pain to get it, So that's one of the reasons why there's such a heavy regulation on it nowadays, as opposed to, like you were saying back 7 years ago when you first started. Oh.
This is a tough topic to cover everything on, and there is no simple answer to that question.
Well, I think the simple answer is, if you're a family member or a loved one of somebody that has it, the simple answer is be supportive. Let them know you don't approve of it, but be supportive of them as an individual. Be supportive of whatever they've gone through.
And do your research too.
Yeah. As well, there are what am I thinking? Groups. There are groups that they can meet online, they meet in person. So if you're someone that has a family member or a loved one, you can go to these groups. It's not AA, but it's kind of like AA, where
they're just support group.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. So there's these support groups out there that people that are just like you are going through it. So they can be an additional resource for you. They can be a support structure for you, because while the person with the addiction needs that support, they need that familiar support, that friendly support, and they support structure to help them recover. While they need that, you also need support, because you can't do it by yourself, and you can't just talk to just anybody, because as much as we love talking to our friends, as much we love talking to those that are close to us and have our backs, a lot of times what winds up happening is those individuals, either intentionally or unintentionally, become biased. And when they become biased, they can't give you good information. That information is biased information, which is meant to only benefit you, which is something that's good. It's not something to be upset about, but it's only going to benefit you and not benefit the other person. So they can't remain unbiased anymore because of their relationship to you. But the support groups, and even if you decide that you need to go to therapy is a great tool that unfortunately has been stigmatized in our society. But you, as a family member or friend, can also go to therapy to help you learn to live with somebody with an addiction. It's no different than if you're living with someone who's battling stage 4 cancer, and they're having to go into hospice. There's no difference than, going to a support group for a family member with some other terminal illness, all of these support groups are out there. There's a ton of people that are going through the same things you're going through that can be a resource and a support structure for you. You know, on the times when you finally hit your wit's end, you can reach out to these support groups and hit a sponsor or whatever up. I don't think they call them sponsors, but hit them up and, you know, today was a bad day. We had this, we had that. But ultimately understand that at the end of the day, you can't make that person change. You just can't do it. You physically, mentally do not have the capacity to make that individual move away from that addiction. It has to be their choice, whether it's they make it before they get there or when they hit rock bottom. It has to be their choice. If they have not made, and I don't mean the lip service they give you, oh no, I'm going to change. I'm going to change. I'm going to, you know, do better. I'm going to go to rehab and I'm going to do better because I want to do it for you. Well, stop. Don't want you to do it for me. I want you to do it for you. I want you to get better for you. So you can't make them do that. That's not, especially with adults, it's not something you can do. And you have to get that in your head, get that through your thick skulls that you can't make them change. I don't care how hard you try. You can't make them do it. Threaten to leave them. You know, I'm going to divorce you. I'm going to leave you. I'm going to find somebody else, blah, 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 blah. That may be rock bottom for some. Chances are you leaving, it's not rock bottom for them. You know, it's something way
Unfortunately.
worse. Yeah. It's typically something way worse. It's a life-altering crash that nearly kills them or somebody else. It's, you know, an attempt at suicide. It's the loss of a whole family. You know, it's loss of a job, loss of money, loss of a home. You know, all of these things wind up being the rock bottom. And often enough, it takes that for some of these people to wake up and finally make that decision that I'm tired of living like this. I'm tired of, you know, having a life dedicated to this substance or this action. But they have to get there on their own. So as a family member or a loved one that's dealing with that, being a support structure and an advocate for them and seeking support for yourself is really the only, you know, guaranteed advice that I can think of for someone that's in that particular situation. And that's based off of my own life experience, you know, my own understanding of living with family members or loved ones that have got an addiction problem is try, by God, you know, try. But in the end, just understand that it's out of your control. It is not in your realm of control, and you can't let it dominate your life.
Yeah, that's one thing that I kind of want to touch on too is eventually it's going to take so much of a toll on you, especially if you're putting a bunch of energy into trying to help, you know, this loved one that's going through this. Tough love is sometimes always the best love too.
I've been there.
And you've got to you got to care about yourself and your mental well-being and your, you know, health in general. It's a hard thing to say, but, you know, I've had to tell multiple people to do it, and I've had to do it myself. Sometimes you got to cut the cord.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to do. It's not my first bit of advice, but just keep that in mind that it's going to take a toll on you. I don't necessarily want to say that, you know, everybody that's going through real hard addiction that they're trying to intentionally be selfish, but it can end up being selfish. They can end up stealing. Anything to feed that addiction, they're going to do it.
Yep.
No matter what. And because it gets, I mean, it has a grip
addicts,
on people.
The good addicts are silver-tongued devils.
Oh yeah,
They
I mean,
can make
it
you
has
believe
a
whatever
grip
you
on
want.
them. Oh yeah, and they can't until they seek help themselves. It's not going to go away.
Nope.
So once you've done everything you can, and if you have exhausted everything that you possibly could do, and nothing's working, just make sure you care about yourself too. Make sure you worry about yourself, and if it comes down to it, tough love.
Yeah.
And that sometimes that'll turn around too. I mean, if you step away from them and you do it the right way, it sometimes it'll open their eyes. So just, I wish I could say that about my personal life, but that's not necessarily true in my personal life. But it's an option there. It's an option. So
I had something else I was going to say about positive addiction criteria, but I don't want to kind of go through that. There's like 6 little things, and I don't feel like reading directly from the screen. But on talking about positive side of it, while there is some confliction or contradiction to calling something a positive addiction an addiction, there is such a thing, at least as it's mostly accepted right now, is that you can have positive addictions. And that goes back to like I was talking about, somebody that's dealing with grief deciding to, well, I do like running, so I'm going to go run to help me get rid of my grief. Same thing can be said for people that like to work out, whether it's yoga, meditating. There are addictions you can have that are positive addictions, something that is going to benefit you, but is not all consuming of your life. And it's something that you can dedicate a small portion of your time, an hour or so of your time, to that particular thing. If it's working out, you're dedicating an hour, 2 hours for working out, for the health benefits of it. You and I did it whenever you were back here, going on night shift the night before we go back on duty. We're at the gym, we're knocking out 2.5 hour workouts, because that's the time we could really get in a really good, strong workout. And then even now, I still maintain my routine of going before work. So I make sure that every day before work, I've got an hour of my day carved out specifically for being able to go to the gym. And that's for the health aspects of it. Once I got back into the habit, because I did get out of it for a year. But once I got back into the habit, I fell right back into the aspect of I'd feel like I don't have as much energy and I'm not as ready to go for the day as far as work goes if I don't go to the gym. So if I skip the gym, it definitely feels like things are off. And that could be the psychological aspect as far as my routines and things like that go. But that is an hour. There we go. That is an hour of my day that, I carve out and dedicate to my positive addiction, which is going to the gym and working out. I also,
most people don't associate addiction with positivity, though.
No, they don't. And that's the whole reason why the contention or the confliction over causing an addiction, because there's so much negativity associated with the word addiction. When you hear addiction, it's bad. Well, people get addicted to TV shows. People get addicted to social media. If it's regulated, it's not a bad thing. But if it's something that's all consuming, that's bad. So no, and that's the point of me saying that there was a contention about it, was because people don't associate good with addiction. But it is something that, it is technically an addiction because it does benefit you or cause some change in your life because you do it. And if you don't do it, it can take away from, or seem like it takes away from the joy that you have. But it's just a matter of whether you let it become all consuming is what makes the difference, and whether or not it's, the bad addiction or the good addiction. But brother, I've only got one other thing that I kind of really wanted to talk about, and we talked about it offline, in regards to addiction. So I'm gonna open it up to you real quick. I say real quick, I'm gonna open it up to you, period. If there's anything you want to add, roll on with, or whatever, because I've really only got one other thing I want to talk about with it that I think is something that's beneficial, at least to me it is.
You talking about the thing that we talked about on the phone?
Yeah.
No, just roll with that.
Okay.
Go with it, brother.
All right. So one thing that I have felt, even before I went to college, was I personally, and it could be just because of my life experience with individuals with addictions, I got frustrated and got tired of hearing that an addiction was a disease. When I think of disease, I think of flu. I think of, um, any number of medical diseases. That's what I think of as a disease. It's something that develops. It's something that, you either can't control or you have to take medication in order to eradicate it. That to me is what a disease is. You have mental health diseases. And for the longest time, it was taught to me and told to me that addiction was a disease, and it didn't sit well with me. And I'm not going on this topic to try to be confrontational with anybody, but it's my belief on it. I've never believed that having an addiction was a disease, because by saying it's a disease, it means it's something that you had no control on, and that in and of itself is a lie. So while I was preparing for this podcast, I was going through and searching different topics and looking for peer-reviewed articles to kind of glean some information from, to kind of add some more context to what we're talking about. I actually come across an article in the Psychiatric Times. It was an article published in 2002 called Action. I can't even talk. It's published in 2002 in Psychiatric Times. Stop smiling. It's not funny. But it was published in 2002. It's called Addiction is a Choice. And I was reading through it, and a lot of the things in it, supported my thoughts on it. And it's real easy when you're reading something that supports your personal beliefs and things like that. It's real easy to get kind of drawn into it, and all of a sudden that's the gospel. So I made sure, before I even told you about it, Chris, I made sure that it was something that was, at least peer reviewed in the terms of before it was published in a publication like Psychiatric Times. Obviously, because it's Psychiatric Times, it obviously has an effect on the mental health community. So I made sure it was peer reviewed before I even really kind of bit down into it. And what the article wound up saying was essentially is that in the US, calling an addiction a disease is clinical folklore. And that's what the writer of the article said. It's clinical folklore, in the sense of it's a mistake. It's a lie. It's not true. And where he went with it was, he obviously discussed the scientific studies and presented some of the empirical data that supports this philosophy, or this fact, I'm going to call it, in that when you're talking about addiction, a lot of people will think or say that when you have this addiction that, it chemically changes you. And what the science has shown is that it's only in particular substances that will chemically change you. So if you've got an addiction to gambling or sex or video games or social media or TV or whatever, you're not chemically being changed by this. This is not a chemical reaction in your body that's causing this. It's not a dopamine drop that's or a dopamine high that's causing this. It's literally a behavioral thing. Now, obviously, there are substances, heroin, marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine. There are these substances that can chemically change your blood for a high, but it doesn't chemically change you to where you can't recover. Now, you do have instances like lifelong alcoholics, and we discussed about it offline. Lifelong alcoholics, these individuals engage in this behavior of consuming alcohol in such high consumption levels for such long period of times that, in my simplistic terms, it eventually turns your brain into mush. You wind up developing, was it dementia we were talking about?
Yeah, it's alcoholics dementia. Yeah.
You wind up developing dementia because of the abuse of alcohol over this long time. And it's not the addiction that becomes the problem at the end of that. It's dementia. It's dementia caused by alcoholism. And the alcoholism in and of itself is a behavior. You don't become an alcoholic or have alcoholism if you don't consume alcohol. Well, you don't consume alcohol if you get away from the habit of consuming it. So you say, oh, well, it started out just having a couple of drinks with buddies, and then it became something we did after work, and then it just became something that I did on a regular basis, and it just kind of grew and got out of control. Okay, well, if you put down the PBR or whatever it is that you consume, and you move away from taking that substance in, well, you move away from your addiction. You start to get away from your addiction. Now, that doesn't mean that later down the road, you don't have another sip and all of a sudden you're right back into a case a day. But it's the behavior. So what addictions, and what the article says, is that addictions are essentially a behavioral issue, not a disease. It's a behavioral change that needs to happen in a person. Because it was a behavioral change that caused it, it needs to be a reverse behavioral change to undo it. And one of the examples that the writer of the article gave was the simple form of Alcoholics Anonymous. So when you become someone who's dealing with alcoholism, oftentimes, whether through legal court orders, personal choice, or whatever the case may be, you wind up going to AA, or Alcoholics Anonymous. You wind up going here, and I've never personally been. So if I'm speaking out of terms for anybody that has been, please understand, I don't mean that as to an insult to the program. I think it's a great program. But in that, it winds up trying to get the individual, the patient, to change their behavioral pattern, try to change the behavior of consuming alcohol. That's literally the whole point of it. And they have these 12 steps that you go through. And part of it is, if I'm not mistaken, part of it is believing in a higher power or a higher cause to help you get through these 12 steps and things like that. So the person that wrote the article postulated in this is that what disease is changed by a behavior? Okay. It's like putting a hand on a hot burner. Well, if all you got to do is take your hand off the burner to make the burning stop, that's not a disease. So if you're taking an action, whether it's consuming alcohol, consuming drugs, participating in gambling, participating in, copious amounts of sexual intercourse, things of those nature, if you take that away and the addiction stops, then it's not a disease. A disease is not something that can be fixed just by stop doing what you're doing. The same as is speeding. If you don't want to get a speeding ticket, you stop speeding. You abide by the traffic laws. Well, that's the same thing here. If you don't want to be consumed by a life of an addiction to alcohol, drugs, gambling, whatever the case may be, social media, that one's horrible nowadays, in my opinion. If you don't want to be consumed by these things, then you have to change that behavioral pattern. So in watching or in reading this article, it really struck a chord with me. And the fact that this article had scientific, empirical information to support it that was peer reviewed, was kind of eye-opening for me, because it contradicted everything that I've always been told. It contradicted some of the things that I learned when I was in college, which was that addiction is a disease. And of course, I already stated, I don't believe that. I believe it's a behavioral issue. It's not a disease. And now I've read this article that apparently came out in 2002 that says, no, it's not. It's a behavioral thing. And the author of the article even said that, once his book, which is titled the same, Addiction is a Choice, once his book reached the United Kingdom over there in Britain, he was catching a lot of heat from the psychiatric and psychological community over there. He was receiving a lot of heat because all of these individuals from over there were basically saying, you're basically saying something we already know. You're pushing against a door that's already open. The rest of the world already knows that addiction is a choice. Addiction is a behavioral thing, and it's a choice. It's not a disease. But here in the US, it's a folklore that keeps getting pushed. And what I think the ultimate portion of what he was trying to get to with this article wasn't just that it's a choice, but by calling it a disease, by calling addiction a disease, what some of these therapists, if this is what they're doing, what some of these therapists are telling their patients, well, what you have is in a disease. Well, now all of a sudden, what this patient is understanding was this is a disease that I've got no control over. This is something that I can't control, so it's not my fault. Well, now all of a sudden, you're taking their responsibility for their addiction away from them. Well, if you take that responsibility for causing the addiction to begin with away from them, then what motivation or benefit do they have to stop it? You know, what motivation or benefit is there to them in trying to reverse that behavior to move away from that addiction if they have the understanding and or the excuse that it's a disease and it's not their fault? Well, I developed this addiction, so it's not my fault. No, you develop cancer, you develop moles, you develop all kinds of crap, but you don't develop an addiction. You make a behavioral choice, and then the addiction develops from there. But it was your choice to start doing it and to continue doing it every day from the time you began to the time you were where you are. It was your choice. And the simplistic way of solving this addiction is to stop doing it. Now, and I want to emphasize that it's the simplistic way, because like everything else in life, it's a whole lot easier said than done. I can tell you right now, as someone that was a long-time heavy smoker, when I decided that I was done with cigarettes, I had to take a medication to help me get off of the addiction. And I say help take a medication to get me off of the addiction because it wasn't the medication that cured the addiction. The addiction wasn't a cure or wasn't a disease because it was a choice. I chose to smoke cigarettes and I became addicted to nicotine. I became addicted to the oral fixation and the I forget what they call it with your hands. But being able to do something with my hands, all of a sudden I didn't know what to do with my hands. That was the behavioral thing, and I became addicted. It's funny. It's a little funny. I became addicted with this, so I wound up taking Chantix, which, by the way, if you've never taken it, I don't know how it affects everyone, but for me, on the both times that I had taken it, good dreams were really, really good. Like, I like it a lot. The bad ones, completely freaking mortifying. When you have to wake up in the middle of a dream and then convince yourself that you are in fact actually awake and you're not in fact still dreaming, only to find out, yeah, you're still dreaming and it's still a nightmare and it's horrible. So you have to wake up again to try to convince yourself that you're not dreaming and you're actually back in the real world. That's a bad dream. And they're horrible. And I don't remember dreams, but I remember waking up in a panic at times because they were that vivid. But because they were that vivid, the good ones, they were good. They were good. I like them a lot. I'm a big dumb animal, folks. I'm sorry. But Chris and I had talked about it when we were on the phone earlier about, talking about calling addiction a choice and not a disease. And he brought up the fact that there are people that are addicted to alcohol. They wind up taking medications that if they consume alcohol, it makes them vomit. And it's the same with narcotics and other drugs. Marijuana, I think they have one for marijuana as well. So if you take these medications and then you consume these opioid or these blockers for whatever substance it is, it makes you nauseous, it makes you sick. The same thing was with the Chantix. So when I took the Chantix, it caused cigarettes to taste absolutely disgusting. I mean, completely horrible. And to begin with, it was kind of like eating a turd. You just, oh God, it's horrible, but I wanted a cigarette, Nobody wants to eat a turd. You watch your dog do it, seems fine. You don't want to eat a turd, but I mean, if you're addicted to turds, you're going to do it. It's bad, but it is what it is. Dude, I'm sorry. I can't stop myself tonight. I don't know what's wrong.
Okay. It's okay.
I'm so stupid. But I took the Chantix and it was just a horrible taste in my mouth. And until my body was able to start deciding, yeah, we don't like this, bro. You got to stop. Through the horrible taste of the cigarette smoke and the nicotine and everything, eventually I started lessening the cigarettes. Well, all this medication did was change the behavior. It didn't even change the behavior, because if I could have suffered through the flavor and the taste, I could have kept doing it, but I couldn't. So
it helped you. It helped you change the behavior. It was a
right. It helped change the behavior by causing it to be something I didn't like anymore. So the medication itself didn't cure my addiction. It caused a change in behavior. Well, keeping on the topic of addiction as a choice, it's a behavioral change. And just like the author of the article said, how can a disease be cured by a change in behavior or by a belief in a higher power? Now, in saying that, I don't mean to offend anybody who's spiritual, religious, anything. I'm also religious, but there are others that are not. So the doctor was asking, if all it takes for you to believe in something higher, believe in a higher cause, believe in a higher power, if all it took was that, and then put in the work to cure a disease, then how is that a disease? And that makes a lot of sense to me, because the Chantix didn't cure my addiction to smoking and nicotine. It merely helped me change the behavior and the habit. Please tell me that was your chair.
It was.
Okay. It helped me change the behavior and the habit of smoking. The same if you're trying to start a new habit. If you want to start working out and going to the gym, then you have to get into a habit of it. You got to start it on a certain day, certain time. 8 o'clock every morning, 9 o'clock every night, I'm going to go to the gym and work out for an hour and come home. And you have to stick to it until it becomes a habit. Well, to get past and get rid of an addiction, it's the same way. Okay, I'm not going to have a drink today. I'm not going to smoke a cigarette today. I'm not going to snort a line of Coke today.
It's conscious. It can be a conscious effort.
Yeah, 100%. Sure. So I personally want to start, and I know if I have these discussions, and I know they'll come up with people and families and things like that in the future as I'm going through my profession and my everyday life. This is something I'm going to start to push a little harder, is that this person that has this addiction is making a choice to have it. This is something that they can 100% control. They just have to make the choice, just like we were talking earlier at the beginning of the podcast. This is a beautiful way to bring this all back around. Just like they made the choice to start it, they can make the choice to stop. And just like we were saying with, you as a family member wanting to help them get away from this addiction, it has to be their choice. That makes it not a disease. If I can choose not to be sick, that's not a disease. So this is something I'm really going to start pushing as far as myself goes, because it is a behavioral thing that the individual is choosing, and it's getting them to make the choice on their own and wholeheartedly that's going to get them away from that. So I just thought that was really important. It's I guess in a sense it kind of helps with dealing with someone that has an addiction, but on the same token, it also helps if you're somebody that's dealing with an addiction, because maybe, just maybe, hearing me and Chris here sitting here say these things, it'll kind of flip a switch in your head that if you've got an addiction and one of these negative addictions, that it's literally your choice. All you've got to do is make the choice to not do it. And we know, especially me, we know it's not easy. We know making the choice isn't easy, but you got to make it. If it's something that's dominating your life and ruining your life and taking the enjoyment and the joy and the love out of your life, then it's a choice you have to make. You've got to make it. Now, if you're going to sit here and come up with all the excuses in the world why not to do it, well, then you're not ready to quit. And this isn't a choice that you're ready to make. And there's none of us that are going to help you with it. We feel for you and we want you to get better, but there's nothing we can do for you. There's nothing your family or your loved ones can do for you. It's something that you've got to fight. It's something you've got to make the choice on. And that's what this is all about. That's what we're trying to get across here is whether you're dealing with it, whether you got a family member that's dealing with it, it's a choice this person is making, and it's a choice they have to make to get away from it. I miss anything? Am I wrong?
No. I mean, I'm sure that there's many people out there with, that have, $200,000 worth of degrees that are going to disagree with you, Brian. But I mean, we tell people that all the time. It's their choice.
Yeah.
They've got to decide when they're ready to get help. So, I mean, it makes sense. The author of that article, you said he was a psychologist.
Yeah, I don't know what his profession was, but it was an article he published in Psychiatric Times.
Okay. Well, if it made Psychiatric Times, he's probably fairly educated.
I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, he brings up a good point that, and of course, in the United States, everybody's got to be politically correct, and everybody's got to put some, some word behind it, or call it. They don't want to call it as it is sometimes around here.
Sometimes you got to call a spade a spade.
Yeah, I mean, it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's probably a duck.
Yep.
But it's like you said, it's easier said than done. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, it's a tough road.
I've been through it myself with alcohol, and it's not an easy thing to do. But you've got to want to do it. Yeah. I mean, you've got to want to do it.
You got to want to put in the work.
Yeah, and it does take work, and there's those days where you're just like, man, this sucks, and you wish you could pick up another drink, have a drink, but
yeah,
you got to make that conscious effort. Hey, I can't, But once you get to that point, and once your loved one gets to that point, things do get better, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. You gotta get there.
Yeah, I completely agree. So. All right. Well, if you don't have anything, bro? I don't know, man.
I do want to say one thing. I really like that shirt. Who got you that shirt, bro?
You like that? That's a great shirt. Yeah. I don't know, this good old boy that I know kind of listened to me one day when he heard me talk about the greatest plane ever created. It's the C-130, by the way. And decided to gift me with this. I wear this shirt quite often.
I like that shirt. That color goes good.
The what?
The color looks good on you.
I appreciate it. I'm an earthy tones kind of guy. Kind of matches my eyes a little bit. Yeah. By the way, if you can shoot me the address from where you got this from when you sent it to me, the ink's starting to fade a little bit from its use, so I'm probably going to need to re-up on my shirt.
Yeah, I'll try to find them.
Yeah. Appreciate it again. By the way, I do love my shirt. It's okay. The AC-130U Spooky, for those that don't know. It's an amazing aircraft. I don't know who decided to put guns on a cargo plane, but you're a bona fide genius, sir.
Yeah. America appreciates you, sir.
Yes, they do. And they're only getting better. I mean, it's a 50-year-old aircraft that it's just getting better. I mean, they've only re-upped it and made newer models. I mean, come on, man. It's a wine that gets finer with time.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I don't have anything else, brother. I don't know if you've got anything else, but guys, we really appreciate your time. We hope we didn't go too far off the rails off this one. As things were kicking in a little differently tonight than most nights, so my brain was a little more scattered than normal, but we definitely appreciate the time. We appreciate everything that you guys, all the feedback you give us and everything. Like I said, this particular episode was one that was a listener requested episode. And I want to reach out to all you guys, and Chris and I both, we want to reach out to y'all that, the more you guys reach out to us, the more that you get a message to us, whether it's, through our social media platforms, text message, phone call, whatever the case it may be, see us in person, get your situations out here, guys. I mean, both of us have been in public safety for quite a while now. And on top of what we've acquired through our own training, knowledge, and experience, we've got access to individuals that have even more, people that have dealt other situations. And those are individuals that we can also bring into the conversation to either glean information from them for ourselves that we can regurgitate here on the podcast for you, or we can bring them in and actually have a one-on-one interview with them and get them involved in this as well and have them part of the conversation. So reach out to us, let us know the situations that you're going through and things like that. Let us know if there's just in particular a topic that you want to talk about, and it doesn't have to be about mental health. It can be about, you know, a professional thing. It could be a career goal oriented thing. So reach out to us. You know, life is got a lot of oysters in it, and we're willing to sit here and help crack them all open with you. So reach out to us. Obviously, we've got the podcast on Buzzsprout. I believe there's a feedback thing on there. We've got the social media on Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. If I can find more, I'm going to get it out there. And because we put it out on Buzzsprout, it reaches out to about 18 or 19 other platforms. So you can listen to us just about anywhere. It's a simple search through Google or your search platform for Breach Your Mind, and you can find us just about anywhere. So reach out to us and let us know. Give us some feedback, some insight. Even if you guys got negative comments, I know Chris and I both we'd love to hear the criticism of it, because I mean we're only gonna get more information out of it by you giving it to us. So we can't fix it if we don't, we're broken. So if you give us some information, good, bad, or otherwise, we're willing to take it in, listen to it, read it, and try to do something better. All we want to do is try to help out. So by all means, reach out to us. And until next time, guys, be safe, and we appreciate it.